welcome. We have a new Meet the Chief series, and today we're very, very fortunate to have Chief Master Sergeant Garcia join us from the Band of the West, and she's actually en route to be our new CFM at the Pentagon, and she'll be there sooner than later. We're dealing with the current challenges of COVID-19, but she'll be I think her household goods have been shipped there, and she'll follow suit soon. And so we're just very excited to have you, and maybe we'll just kind of start with what got you into the Air Force, maybe a little bit about where you went to school and all that, and how you ended up joining.
Well, thank you, first of all, inviting me to be interviewed. It's quite an honor, and I appreciate the shout out here. I actually hail from Toledo, Ohio. So I'm pretty close to you as a neighbor there in Dayton, Ohio. Born and raised there, went to Whitmer High School, and really it was in high school that I fell in love with music and decided that's what I wanted to do. So I was part of the Toledo Symphony. I was taking lessons and really, really grounded myself in music. And it's interesting, of all the places that I wanted to audition for college, the one I actually ended up attending was my parents' pick, not my pick. And so I picked all of the Northwest schools, Cleveland and Indiana University, went out and auditioned. I went down to Florida State at the request of my parents, thinking, oh, I don't want to go down there. And as soon as I stepped on campus, I fell in love with it. And it was a really interesting audition. It didn't happen at Florida State. The teacher, Dr. Frank Kowalski, was performing with the Naples Symphony, and he was en route. So we actually met at the Orlando airport.
Oh, cool.
Got a conference room, and thank goodness, because it was my worst audition. I was nervous, the reeds weren't working, but I had an hour lesson with him, and he thought, okay, I can at least work with her. And it was the best 5 years of my life down there at Florida State. As a music ed major, I wanted to be performance really bad, but it wasn't until the final year that he said, okay, maybe you can do this. You still need some work.
Yeah.
So I worked the summers at Brevard Music Camp and College Light Opera Company there in Falmouth, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Fantastic summer performing in the pit on clarinet and bass clarinet. And then I auditioned for CCM, Cincinnati Conservatory of Music, and spent the next year and a half there, studying with Ron DeCant, and playing in every ensemble I possibly could. I'd go down to the basement every morning because I'm a morning person, and I'd see all the advertisements, play in this pit orchestra, play in that orchestra. Okay, I'm going to sign up.
Yeah.
Get as much experience as I can. So it was good times. It was hard work. Yeah. And after about a year and a half, I thought, I'm ready to find a job. And so I started looking in the musicians advertisements, and I saw Air Force bands, and the rest is really history.
That's awesome. So where did you end up auditioning for the Air Force?
That is an interesting story. The first person that I spoke to, the auditions coordinator, was Staff Sergeant David Garcia. You'll notice the similar last names. He ended up being my husband. We're still married. Had a wonderful relationship there that actually didn't form for a couple of years. But Offutt Air Force Base was my first duty station, and they had 2 clarinet openings. They also had a tour coming up.
Oh, cool.
In Iowa in February. And I remember it being really, really cold. So I went last night online and I said, how cold was it in 1996, which was when I came into the Air Force? And it turns out there was an Arctic front that had moved in. So the entire tour that I went on as a civilian, as part of my audition, was high of -12 degrees, low of -30 degrees for the week. We had to keep the buses running. Otherwise, the fuel lines would have frozen. So believe it or not, the first rehearsal, I fell in love with Air Force bands. I had gone to some pretty big name schools with some pretty amazing performers. CCM, Florida State, some amazing musicians there. I was average to below average as far as performance, although I worked really hard. When I got to Offutt Air Force Base in that first rehearsal, everybody was at a really high performance level, and I almost cried. It was the best sounding ensemble I'd been in, just because of that performance level. So I knew then that I wanted to do it. I auditioned along with Nicole Schininger, now who's chief out at Scott Air Force Base. And we told them, don't tell us if we made it in until the end of the tour, because we wanted to enjoy the tour. Fortunately for us, we both made it in. And so I spent 5 years there at Offutt Air Force Base.
And you probably still had the Florida blood, so that cold was even more brutal, I'm sure.
It really, really was.
Okay, so you started Offutt, and where else have you been up until this point?
Well, my dream in coming in the Air Force was to play clarinet and to travel. So, of course, I volunteered for Germany. Yeah. And fortunate enough that David and I both were slid into 2 clarinet positions there at USAFE. So from 2001 to 5, I was at CMSgt Air Base. Interesting times. We arrived in late August, and September 11th happened about 11 days later. So as exciting as it was to land in country, everything changed. The base shut down, and the performances were canceled for the first 2-3 months until we could get our feel for the security, what had happened to America. So that really formed the basis of our time there. It changed everything. Yeah. I remember living on the economy, as we call it, living in a home that was owned by one of the German nationals, and my landlord didn't speak any English. He was Sicilian, so from Italy. He spoke Italian and German, no English. But I do remember coming to him, or he coming to me, and communicating how devastated he was. And all of those European countries were at what had happened to America. So it was my first taste of being in Europe, and it was at the most traumatic time for America back then. Now from USAFE, had some great experiences there. We returned to the States in 2005 to Robins Air Force Base there in Warner Robins, Georgia. And I had a wonderful 4 years there. Some of the greatest experiences I've had, performing with the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, performing with name artists like Winona Judd, and taking Operation Season's greetings over to the troops. I was ADVON, which meant I coordinated all of the steps on the ground for a couple of those OSG performances. Most memorable was with Kid Rock and Carlos Mencia.
Oh, wow.
So it was my job to get them in and out of countries. I had 70 passports that never left my side, and a lot resting on that, but it was a wonderful experience. So 4 years with the...
I was going to say, we had a couple people here that were probably with you. Master Sergeant Mike Richter spent some time there, and my supervisor, Andy Wenzakowski, might have been there at that time with you. I'm not sure, but I heard it was really cool because you guys had basically a worldwide mission with Robins.
We really did, and it took us out of our comfort zone. I know Sergeant Richter and we teamed up in supply, but he did a lot of ADVON as well for Operation Season's greetings, and it grew us really, really fast to be on the planning side of those performances.
Yeah.
But from there, I've got a long career. I'm old. From there, we went to Lackland Air Force Base, and I got my feet wet again with the concert band, with the Woodwind Quintet, and all of the performances that happened here in San Antonio. Fiesta, Red Ribbon Week, which is our drug-free show. The rock band does that, but I got to introduce them. And all of the community relations as we get out and do educational programs over here. But that was a short 2.5 years before I went to the Pentagon as the assistant career field manager.
Yeah.
Um, I always looked for opportunities to get out of my comfort zone, and that one landed in my lap, and I was thrilled to take that on. So 4 years there, then back to Lackland. Here I am right now. And then I had the opportunity to interview for the career field manager position, and very, very honored that they selected me. So I'm looking forward to going back.
Who was the CFM when you were assistant CFM?
Chief Master Sergeant Peter Aiello
Oh, yeah. Okay.
to start for my first 2 years. And then Chief Master Sergeant Craig Ledoux stepped in for the second 2 years I was there. So I had the best of both worlds. They're both incredibly brilliant men and completely different leadership styles. So I sat there with eyes wide open and I said, okay, I'm going to watch what they do, try to absorb as much as I can and learn from them. And fortunate for me, I had two really winning chiefs to learn from.
Now, a question I have. So being at Lackland, kind of some of the uniqueness of, right on the ground with the troops coming out. What unique optics you've had on being right there with the people going through basic training and then coming out of basic training. And when I went through it, there was a drum and bugle corps that the guaranteed musicians will be a part of, but then also some people that are not necessarily going into the music career field, but have had past experience. And so that's, fun time. And when I was there, Mr. Johnson was there, and I think he's been there and is still there. And
he is still there. And
yeah.
A funny story, he was there when I went to basic training.
That's what
he
I
was a drum and bugle. Unbelievable. Great, wonderful guy.
Yeah. And then Master Sergeant Doug Cost, we interviewed, his will be released, but we released him and his wife. And we're excited to hear some of his stories. But he just finished his tour with being the MTI for the drum and bugle at Lackland. But yeah, share some kind of stories and what you've gained out of being right there with the BMT, and even now, seeing how they've adjusted to the current situation, and they're still moving forward and getting our airmen and airmen ready for what they got to do for the mission.
They certainly are. In fact, training is a priority. So when COVID first hit and the bases turned to telework, mission essential people only, Band of the West was in a unique position because our outreach program, our travel program ceased to help the base out. And so we were part of the RQI cell, which basically logged in who needed to be on restriction of movement or quarantine or isolation. And we assisted with that for about a month.
Yeah.
They told us throughout that training was a priority.
Yeah.
So basic training is still going on. In fact, when I came into work today, we had special forces and basic trainees marching in formation a little farther apart than you're used to seeing.
Right.
They have the face masks on, all of them now.
Yeah.
They go through 14 days of quarantine when they arrive. And so they're taking precautions, but that is a priority. So that is going to continue from here on out, I expect, as we all try to adapt to a new norm. But before that time, Band of the West was located in a building that is now designated to be demolished. We just moved in 2018 to the old BMT reception center, but back in the old building, we were right next to drum and bugle. Yeah. So we had commander's calls, and we would be sitting there reading decorations, listening to Jody's and the bass drum booming from downstairs. Quite the experience.
Yeah. Yeah, and for those who don't know, that was my audition took place at Lackland, and so I do remember those facilities.
They're pretty awful.
Yeah, I went upstairs, I think, to the practice facilities and came down 3 flights. So I think were they previously dorms? Is that what they?
Yes,
yeah,
they were basic training dorms. Yeah. I've been in actually 2 different buildings since in my 2 times. Both of them don't function anymore as band facilities, thank goodness. Yeah. And that one is designated to be bulldozed, and they'll build a new building in its place as part of the new campus that is basic training. We tease the new BMT trainees when they come out now that times are not as hard as they once were. You get filtered water, you get snack time, you get time to talk with the MTIs, and back in my day, that wasn't the case.
And maybe air conditioning is a little bit more consistent. I know it's all
Yes.
the problem in Texas is that air conditioning goes out. So it's
Ooh,
resilient. It's built-in resiliency training.
it really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so but yeah, I know some bands do still march and stuff, and I believe Lackland, you guys have some opportunities still where you participate in some parades and formal ceremonies where your information and whatnot. Maybe there's some
Yes.
unique events that you've been a part of in that regard.
So Fiesta is a thing here in San Antonio. Every April for 2.5 to 3 weeks, the city celebrates. And they celebrate with parades, with concerts, with beauty pageants. Band of the West performs upwards of 12 to 15 events throughout that week, to include a full concert, to include 2 parades on the street, and 2 parades or 1 river parade on the barges. If you've heard of the river walk, we put our rock band on the barge and they float down the river along with many, many other folks from the base. We perform in front of the Alamo, and my experience as a clarinetist marching with the ceremonial band, I love the Fiesta parades because thousands of people come out. And one of the parades is at night. It's the only parade I've ever marched where I could not hear myself play because of the applause. The support from the city is just wonderful. We're Military City, USA, and it makes sense because there are 4 military bases here in San Antonio, and we really get the support of the city. They love it when the military comes out.
Maybe that'll actually be a good segue into a question I just thought of. And, I'm fortunate to be in a military town as well, and the importance of AOR. So I think you guys have a pretty large AOR. We have all of Ohio as our AOR in order to really connect the military to the community where they may not have a natural military presence. So, Dayton has the military presence because we're right here, but if we get up into Cleveland and areas like that, and you guys are all over, the reaction you see when you're able to bring that art, the musical aspect, that connection to the military to folks that don't see it every day, and what that means to them, and kind of the reaction you notice.
We are one of only 2 career fields in the Air Force whose primary mission is outside the gate.
Yeah.
Recruiters and Air Force bands. It's our job to connect with people and the public. And Band of the West has a very, very large region that extends from Texas over to Florida, down along the Gulf Coast, and down farther to Puerto Rico, territory that we added just a couple of years ago to our AOR. And you are absolutely right. We get out to communities that don't get to see the military. That's our job as Air Force bands, not only so they can see the uniform, so they can connect, share their stories with us. It is a sense of pride for so many people in America that their sons, their daughters, their grandparents served in the military. And a lot of times at our performances, small audiences or large, we speak with them, we perform for them, we connect with music, something that's familiar with them. During intermission and after is when we get to talk with them. And I can't tell you how many stories have almost brought me to tears hearing of a family member that has served, or an individual right in front of me that served back in World War II or Vietnam or Desert Storm, and they want to share their stories. We allow them that outlet, which is very, very rewarding. Now, on another side of it, very unique side of it, we are located just south of Randolph Air Force Base, and Randolph Air Force Base is home to recruiting service. So we partnered a couple of years ago with Air Force Recruiting Service when we first brought Puerto Rico into our AOR and our area of responsibility. We wanted to take a team out there to perform. Hurricane had just hit in the fall, and we wanted to get out there as quickly as possible to show that the United States was behind them, backing them, and to share with them, hey, your island has been devastated, but there are opportunities here with employment and jobs with the Air Force. So fortunately, recruiting service helped us out with that, with some of the funding. They came along with us. Since then, we've been back a couple of times, and the outpouring of support is absolutely amazing. Puerto Rican culture is one of music and community, and that's exactly what Air Force bands can provide. So the most recent director of recruiting service, General Levitt, had the opportunity to come with us in the spring when we went to Puerto Rico, and she was at one of the concerts and was truly inspired and grateful at the response. It's hard in this virtual environment to feel the electricity that you get when you're in a live performance. It's hard to explain to our leaders what it's like when you're there in person performing and engaging with folks. There's an energy there that will never come across the screen. So we were able to impart that with General Levitt and her team, and hopefully we'll be able to continue that with the next director of recruiting service, who's General Thomas, our new public affairs, or our former public affairs director, and just continue those relationships.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, curious to your thoughts coming out of the situation we're in now. My optimism is that people are going to really want that sense of community even more than ever. Since we've had to face the isolations and quarantines and all that, and so I'm actually very excited to when we get back out into the communities. The reception was already so great, and I can imagine it's going to be even more coming out of this, because people are really gonna again want that sense of community, and I think that's something that we can really provide through our musical outlet with the military, and they know the military's here for them right now through the current times, and they're going to be there after everything as well. And I think that's just very, very cool thing.
It is a very cool thing, and I totally agree with you. It's interesting, you go on any Air Force Band website right now, and you will see videos that we are producing that connect us with our public. Our job hasn't changed. We are still there to honor, inspire, and connect. It's just the manner in which we do it is different.
Yeah.
And I see our views growing as people see us, as they learn about us. We have a great relationship with the 502nd Air Base Wing Commander, and every weekend she posts one of our videos. It helps her message to her people as she imparts her wish for their health and well-being in this time. The first thing I do when I wake up in the morning, I'm sure I'm not alone, is I go to Facebook and I see what has posted. We all want to connect, and Air Force bands have been doing that. We'll continue to do that, and I hope that we keep some of these initiatives going after we're back to whatever the new norm looks like.
Yeah, I think it's exciting that we in learning all these processes during this time, and like you said, keeping that going. We're boundless in a lot of ways. People that might not be able to make it to our concert for one reason or another, we can bring that concert to them. We'll make sure that we reach everybody we can, and that's a very unique opportunity that I think has kind of really been highlighted out of current challenges, for sure.
Absolutely, and there's no end to the creativity of a musician.
Yeah.
We've had some incredible ideas come out, and more are rolling in. So what happens next? How do we start to get back to the norm? And it was interesting. I found a an article overseas. They had something in a country, I won't remember which, that was basically a drive-in concert,
Oh, cool.
right? So people showed up. There was a live concert on stage, social distancing, the mask, whatever you want. And everybody showed up in their cars, and they had the music on their AM frequency radios. I sent it out to my the director of operations and leadership team here, and got a response back. Hey, we've done this before. Don't laugh. Up at Hanscom back in the day, there was actually a concert that they did, and the people would come out in their cars and they broadcast over there. So we don't know what the future is going to look like as far as parades, concerts. I think it's going to be a hybrid for a little while here, but one thing I don't doubt is the creativity of our musicians to figure out new ways to do business.
Yeah. Hey, that's we're the Air Force, powered by innovation. So, you know, we're here at the ready for those challenges. It's really cool.
Absolutely.
Well, what are you most excited about now, moving forward into the new role of becoming the career field manager, and kind of, you know, what do you see as maybe the most pressing thing moving forward for the bands? And I think we probably touched upon a little bit of, you know, you've already got a great challenge ahead of you with whatever the new normal is, and I think you're taking that by the horns and ready and excited for that. But maybe some other things that have you know, you've been thinking about.
Oh, absolutely. I really am excited for the opportunity and nervous at the same time. It's a big responsibility, and there are some incredible folks that preceded me.
Yeah.
So I have to take care of the daily business of training, of assignments and deployments and sessions and all of that. But what I really want to do is give the career field the tools they need to continue to do the job. So whether that is training with industry standard specialists, you know, the Disney productions, whatnot, so that we can better do productions, or embedding a public affairs audio visual or a production specialist with each of our bands, now that we're moving that direction, to help us do the presentation of the job so we can do the music side of the job. It's providing those tools. Ultimately, though, I want senior leaders in the Air Force to see us as an indispensable tool for their job. I want them to get so excited about us, whether it's recruiting service, State Department, top leaders, down to the MAGCOMs, to say, I need my band because they do this for me. They help me get word out. They help me recruit. They help me break down barriers overseas so that we can have the important discussions we need to have. So I think all of us as musicians in the career field have had those conversations. Why do we have Air Force bands? What is the relevance? If I can help explain the relevance and show the relevance and give the tools to our bands so that they can get that those products out there to the public, I think we will have moved in the right direction.
And, you know, for those that are maybe watching and considering a career in the Air Force bands, one thing I've learned is there's just so many tools and opportunities and support for, you know, not only learning your craft, so, you know, taking lessons or whatnot with your primary instrument, but, you know, the ability I'm learning some production stuff now, and I've never done that before. And I think that's really cool that, you know, hey, what do you need? You know, what do you need to get the job done, to train? We're here for you. And so, you know, we're getting all new software. I think they're working on getting us all the equipment moving forward. And, you know, where else do you get that opportunity? And so people that are maybe looking at, you know, different opportunities coming out of college for, you know, bandsmen, you know, the ability to grow is really boundless, you know, throughout however long you want to entertain a career in the Air Force. And, you know, that's something you don't get everywhere. And I think it's really cool.
It's true. It's true. You get the support, and we are parallel to industry specialists, you know. I think the big rock stars, the jazz specialists, the orchestrally trained musicians, we all start with our craft, right? We perfect our craft. But then when we get out into what we call the real world, we find out that we need additional skills. We need to learn how to market ourselves. We need to learn how to create videos so that we can post our combo performing online. Or in the rock realm, how do we engage with the top publicists and get our music out there? So the Air Force does provide a great opportunity to provide those tools for us if we're willing to take it on. It's neat.
Well, this might be a tough question, but do you have a most memorable performance, thus far? You're gonna have many more, I know, but as far as in your career so far, one that sticks out? I know there's many, I'm sure, but it sounds like Fiesta might be up there as, the most memorable.
It really is. I have Fiesta. I have actually, as a clarinetist, performed with our rock band Top Flight here back in the day.
Yeah.
Overseas, we had a lot of wonderful opportunities. I've already mentioned the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. Oh my goodness, being on stage with Winona. But I think one of the most striking performances I did and the effect on the public happened in Italy when I was back for a Manning assist. So I went, I think, from the Pentagon over to the USAFE band for a Manning assist, a hardship tour down to Italy. And we were performing in Vicenza, Italy. And there's an army base there that wanted to expand. And the people in the city were not having anything to do with it. So we set up outside in a piazza. It's just a square outside, had the stage, the full concert band, and seats in front of us with an audience. Behind the seats, there was actually a line of Polizei, the police, and behind them were the protesters, complete with their signs and bullhorns.
Yeah.
So the concert was really interesting because here we are playing West Side Story and you can hear people yelling and screaming. And it's like, oh, this is the real thing. But what I found as we performed was that when we played certain songs, those protesters would kind of stop yelling and they'd start to listen. And I felt the impact at that point of what we were doing. I don't know that we changed any of their minds, but for several moments throughout the concert, we connected with the people. And maybe they would think a little more favorably of the Americans. Maybe they wouldn't be so quick to judge. So that's where I really felt the humanity of music and how we can connect with the public was, hey, we affected in that concert change, however minute, in those people that were so upset at Americans.
Yeah.
It was very exciting for me to see.
Yeah, it's just such a great arm of diplomacy, bringing arts as a conversation starter, at least. Like you said, it might not change their minds, but at least opening the gates to a little softer conversation. And
yeah,
maybe you had a lot of that with USAFE. Again, for those listening that might not know, USAFE has a pretty extensive region with in which they operate, and they go to Africa, all through Europe. And were there some times that you probably went into some of those regions, such as Africa?
I never went to Africa, but our rock band did, for sure. Our focus was actually towards Bulgaria. Mm-hmm. Bulgaria back in the day when I was there was trying to become part of NATO. Yeah. So I distinctly remember being in the ceremonial band for an event in Bulgaria, and Colin Powell was there along with leadership. He was there for a visit. And this was merely months before they actually became part of NATO. So celebratory events like that, political events, if you will, like that we could be a part of, really didn't understand at the time, but looking back on it, I see the significance of having 40 Americans in uniform next to Colin Powell, and on that same stage. And that's one of many stories.
Yeah. Well, this has been fantastic. I don't want to eat up too much more of your time, but maybe we can kind of get to a couple final questions that I think are really great for our audience. So the first one, maybe, what is the number one thing that you've taken away so far in your career in the Air Force? One, as a musician, and two, as a human being. So the biggest kind of lessons and what you've taken away most so far.
I think it all comes back to connect, and I've talked about connecting quite a bit. I remember back at Florida State going to recitals and performing in recitals, and it was a very serious atmosphere because you were on stage, if you were the one performing, totally focused on your music. You didn't want to make any mistakes. You didn't bother looking at the audience because that would have just distracted you. And I remember a flutist who was either good enough or challenged herself to make eye contact throughout her recital with the audience. And that was one of the few recitals I went to where I actually felt engaged on stage. So what has the Air Force taught me? It's taught me to look up from my stand, to look at the audience, to make eye contact, to connect with them, to see the tears in their eyes or the laughter or the joy. And when you connect that way, it not only is beneficial for the audience member, but I, as a musician, get so much out of it. So I think that's the biggest thing I've gotten from the Air Force is connecting with people, using music to connect with people.
Yeah, and so our our current mission statement is to honor, inspire, connect, and so it hits it right on the head. And I like that you talked about earlier, the going out into the audience and talking to a lot of these veterans and getting to hear their stories, and we honor them through the music, and we hopefully inspire them that everything they did has meaning, and we're building upon that. And then, like you said, the connecting part. Um, Getting that engagement that is just so powerful.
Oh, it's very powerful.
Well, this has been great. It's so much value for people watching, and I'm excited for where we're going and all that. So thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's been an absolute honor. And thank you very much for inviting me to talk with you today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.